This is Nova, and you're listening to the Supernova Shift podcast. Today is a solo episode. Sadly, Sage is not here today, but we're going to be talking about a very fascinating subject, nevertheless, flexibility. I'm a ballerina, and I particularly concentrate on strength and safe flexibility for my training. Today, we're going to learn everything there is to learn from the book Relax into Stretch from Pavel Tsatsouline. If you don't know who he is, Pavel is a Russian master of sports and expert in biomechanics. He is the man who brought kettlebell training to the USA, and it was relatively unknown before he brought it. He was a physical instructor in the Spetsnaz and trained elite forces like SWAT teams, US Navy SEALs, FBI, and Secret Service agents, pro athletes, martial artists, and strength coaches around the world. That's insane. All the knowledge in this podcast is taken from his book. There are plenty of images and concise explanations for his stretches, and I highly recommend you take a look at the numerous books he has written, either on strength training or stretching, because many experts consider him and his techniques to be ahead of his time. This podcast does not cover every detail, so please read the book if you are interested. I've tried these myself, and I have seen immediate improvement, especially in my middle splits. It's truly simple and crazy effective, and I can't believe not enough people know about it. If you're new here, this is a podcast where we're all into leveling up and glowing up, but with actual techniques that are scientifically proven and that are actually going to work, so you can save time and money, which are two very important things. So, some people think stretching is a waste of time, and some even think that being inflexible is a flex. It's not. It's vital to improve your performance, minimize injuries, enable you to move your muscles effectively, have better posture, improve circulation, coordination, balance, range of motion, you name it, but you probably know that already. What you don't know is that you are stretching wrong, and most of us are. We mindlessly get into positions that our sport coaches preach, but the techniques are either inefficient or dangerous. I know that the judo coaches that I have had in the past, because I would do also judo before, they would preach techniques that were completely inefficient, warm-ups and stretches, and it would even be harmful for us. So after this episode, you won't be making the mistakes everyone else is making, and you are going to be so ahead of the game, whatever your sport, and even if you are, as Pavel says, a mere mortal. Like me, you have probably had a coach who has been teaching you these sick methods, and maybe you've even got injured because of them and you don't even know it. So here's the thing. You're stretching your ligaments, but you're supposed to stretch your muscles. Young people rely on tissue elasticity for stretching, but as you age, your collagen and elastin ratio drops. Think elasticity for elastin, and you lose your flexibility. Pavel explains that overstretching, especially of ligaments, can cause microtraumas. These microtraumas lead to scar tissue, which, when it heals, can shorten the muscle and reduce flexibility. And it continues in this infernal cycle because you stretch more and you lose your flexibility, so you stretch even more, etc., etc. It's the exact opposite of what you wanted. So how do you correct that? I'm going to give you a full breakdown of his 3-step guide to alien flexibility. But to understand fully the following, we need to understand his point on the nervous system. Okay, so in his book, Relax into Stretch, he says that the key is to re-educate your nervous system to be flexible at any age. To explain this, he gives this really good example. Picture this test in your mind, or even do it if you want. You can probably extend your leg to a 90-degree angle, right? If you put it on a table or a high chair, for example. Then, do the same thing for your left leg. Easy, no problem. You can probably lift it higher than 90 degrees if you're flexible like I am. If you can do this for each leg individually, then what is keeping you from doing a 180-degree front split? Here's the crazy and simple truth that Pavel explains. No muscle or tendons are running from one leg to the other. It's just skin. The real reason that you can't do this front split is fear and tension. This is your stretch reflex. Since it's a new range of motion, your body deems it unsafe and it contracts the muscles with all its might to protect you. Your stretch reflex needs to be hacked with relaxation and breathing. You need to master muscular tension. So to sum it up, he says that to become super flexible, you need to do the 3 following things. The first thing is you have to trick your muscles into relaxing. The second thing is that you need to convince your nervous system that the new range of motion is safe. And the third one is to use one of the 2 techniques that I'm going to break down for stretching, waiting out the tension or contract relax stretching, aka isometric stretching. And they're actually pretty easy techniques once you get them. You just have to do them correctly. It's ridiculously easy to master. 1 and 2 are achieved through breathing and mindset. More on that later. So let's get right away into the waiting out the tension technique. Moving on to the part 2 of the podcast, waiting out the tension. This technique is pretty self-explanatory, but there are still key points that you have to remember. So you get into the stretch and you wait for your muscles to relax. This can take sometimes up to several minutes. The stretch reflex tires, like everything in your body, and you are now comfortable in the position. So let's imagine you're doing the front split. You wait a little, and then once you can't feel a stretch anymore, you go a bit further, and then you wait again for your muscles to relax. And you can eke out a little more stretch each time. It's important to remember to stay very relaxed, inhale deeply, and as you exhale, imagine melting into the floor. You will find this easier if you already regularly practice meditation. Pavel says that picturing warmth or heat on the muscle you're trying to relax can also increase flexibility. This is because there is a fascinating connection between the emotional centers of the brain, especially the limbic system, and the neural pathways that control muscle tension. So far it seems pretty easy, right? So there are still a few points to remember. It's really important to remember the following. This technique only works on certain lower body stretches that are comfortable to stay in, like the leg straddle you're probably familiar with. It does not work on what Pavel calls the good morning stretch, which is basically a front flexion. And you should also remember to not abuse relaxed stretches and stay away from them when it comes to your back altogether, like toe touching, back bends, etc. Because this will inevitably lead to the deformation of your spinal column. If you want to have a lot more geeky scientific details, I really recommend reading the book because this is a summary. Remember, this is a summary, and the book goes into a lot more detail. Another tip is patience. Patience is key. Pavel says he thinks that a lot of Americans don't have the patience and they just force themselves into the stretch. But you should just wait and have the patience. You have to relax. He warns that you should never stretch when short on time. That is obvious because you're not going to be able to relax. You're going to be tense. Timing yourself is also a bad idea. Listen to your body instead. Timing will create stress, making it impossible to relax. And the 4th tip is that confidence that you can do it will help. It is not a myth. Studies show that fear, anxiety, and pain reduce flexibility. If you believe that you can't, you won't. Good news is, if you believe you can, you will be able to do it. Now on to the second technique, which is contract relax or isometric stretching. This second technique has been proven to be 267% more effective than relaxed stretching. You're probably not familiar with this technique. The geeky term for contract relax stretching is PNF, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. You understand why contract relax is easier and more self-explanatory too. In this technique, you fool the stretch reflex by contracting the muscles temporarily and then deeply relaxing by using contrast breathing. This will shortly inhibit the stretch reflex. This is so powerful and efficient, you have to make sure that you don't go too far at once. This is because the greatest relaxation can only be achieved in contrast to great tension. Think yin and yang. Here's how you do it. Once in the stretch, inhale maximally and tense your entire body, especially your target muscles. Be careful to not decrease the stretch when you're tensing. Hold your breath and tension for a second or two and exhale with a big sigh of relief. Relax instantly and visualize transforming into a limp noodle. It helps to visualize things because your imagination is going to help you make your new reality. And then repeat until you can't go further. To avoid hyperventilating, you have to pause before you take your next breath. This is something he recommends a lot. There are a few things to remember. Again, you can stay relaxed for a while before the next contraction, like I just said, to avoid hyperventilating, except when it comes to forward flexion. Try and hold the no breath, as Pavel calls it, for a couple of seconds before you exhale again. There are more aggressive techniques, like what Pavel calls forced relaxation or clasped knife. In forced relaxation, you contract your muscles for a longer period while breathing shallow. You should contract your muscles gradually with 2/3 of your maximum effort, and then hold the tension until you can't bear it anymore. And let a sigh of relief at the end, and yet let your muscles go limp. Pavel recommends starting with 30 to 60 second contractions. So instead of doing pulses, I guess you could imagine that, you have to hold the tension for longer. The clasp knife is pretty much the same, except you're going to contract your muscles with your maximum effort instead of 2/3, and you hold the tension until the muscles collapse in exhaustion. All that while breathing shallow, because holding your breath would obviously do no good. Try and control the tension in your face and hands, because they will reflect the overall tension in your body. A big benefit of this technique is that it will make you gain strength. Now, the body does not allow a range of motion it cannot control. That is why you need to gain strength for flexibility. You need control in your range of motion. To illustrate this, Pavel uses the example of the frozen shoulder, and it's a medical condition where the shoulder becomes stiff and painful, drastically limiting mobility. If the person is put under anesthesia, their shoulder can suddenly be moved freely, full range of motion is restored temporarily. The brain is restricting movement as a protective mechanism because it doesn't feel safe or strong in that range. That's to prove the point that you need strength in the stretched position to convince your nervous system it's safe to go there. Otherwise, your body will keep blocking you with muscle tension, and it will be impossible to gain flexibility. A little parenthesis on breathing. There is literally no point in doing these techniques if you're not going to do the breathing, or if you're not going to be self-aware when you stretch. You cannot stretch efficiently if you're doing something else simultaneously, like listening to music or watching TV. Pavel emphasizes Oriental disciplines like Tai Chi, Qigong, and yoga to master breathing. The interesting scientific fact that interests me is that breathing is the only thing that is part of both the voluntary and autonomic nervous system. So voluntary will be like moving your arm, and autonomic nervous system is going to be, for example, your digestive system. You're not always focused on your digestive system. It's doing it without your consent, if you know what I mean. By regulating your breathing, you can even regulate your heartbeat, which was originally autonomic and not voluntary. That's incredible and shows the power of breathing. Now on to the most important part of this podcast, the schedule. How do you actually apply this in your daily life? Now on to the real stuff. The best thing is to experiment to see what fits you best. One of the best Russian researchers, Professor Matveyev, forgive my pronunciation, recommends 3 to 5 sets per stretch 4 times a week. Pavel thinks most people do just fine with 2 to 3 sets per stretch 3 times a week, and he also recommends to wait out the tension on the light days. It's important to remember that you shouldn't overdo and pause if you feel sore the next day. You shouldn't feel sore. Never stretch before sports or before bed. The order of stretches depends on you, but Pavel advises to decompress your spine before the hip flexors. I'm going to break down the spine decompression hang. And to stretch your groin after your hip flexors. Now let's break down a few. Remember to look at pictures in the book for accuracy and to be careful. I can't be responsible for your injuries because I obviously can't see you. Now here are 5 stretches for the different muscle groups. There's a lot more stretches than 5 in the book, but I obviously can't break down every single one for the sake of the length of this episode. The first stretch is the souped toe touch. I chose this one because a lot of people do toe touches all the time and they don't even know how to actually do it properly. So you're going to slowly bend forward. You're going to keep your knees locked or close to locked. It's important to keep your head down and to not look up throughout the stretch. Your weight should be balanced between your toes and heels. You're going to inhale, squeeze your butt as hard as possible. Pavel explains that usually squeezing your butt makes it a lot easier to stretch when you're doing contract relax. And also make fists. Stay there for a couple of seconds while contracting and release the tension with a sigh. The body drops down a bit. Wait a few seconds before inhaling again. Once you've gone as far as you can possibly go, bend your knees and go into semi-squat to stand up. This is essential for your back safety. Onto the second stretch, which is the spine decompression hang. If you have a pull-up bar at home, this can be great. There are also different ways to hang. He explains the different ways that you can use, for example, elastic bands and things like that if you don't have one at home. And he also explains that this is a stretch for the short girls out there or the short boys, that it can help you gain height, and this is actually scientifically proven. It also prevents spinal discs from drying out and the spine from being stiff and injury prone, and your spine is such an important part of your body. So hang from a pull-up bar, inhale deeply, and tighten every muscle in your body. Make sure you do not pull yourself up while you are doing this. Hold your breath and contraction for a second. Let all the air out with the tension, with a big sigh of relief. Repeat and alternate grips, so palms forward and back. Do it every day throughout the day, ideally, but of course, if you can't do it all day, every day, twice a week is also better than nothing. Make sure to do that after lifting weights. And to motivate you, I gotta add that it makes your splits better, and also some other stretches, especially if you're a ballerina or you're just trying to get your splits, or you're a gymnast. If you do this stretch, it will help you get your splits. Or if you already have them, keep your splits. Then the side bend. You're gonna stand with your feet shoulder width apart and your knees locked. Feel like you're growing tall by reaching for the ceiling. Then lean sideways, strictly sideways. Use a wall if needed. You can stand next to a wall so that it corrects you naturally. Inhale, squeeze your butt. Exhale and fold sideways slightly without twisting. This is very important. Then we have the biceps and shoulder stretch. Pavel reminds that it's important not to overstretch your shoulders because it's very easy to just go all in and overstretch your shoulders. So sit on the floor with your knees bent and your arms behind you, palms on the ground, and elbows bent. Apply weight on your palms and also apply weight forward, kind of like the feeling when you do a bicep curl. Release and feel the stretch in the shoulders and the biceps. The next stretch is a kneeling hip flexor stretch, which a lot of people do, but once again, you're doing it wrong because chances are you're either looking down, leaning forward, placing your hand on your knee, drifting forward, or twisting, which are all no-nos. First, kneel on the floor, lunge forward. Squared hips, torso, and shin upright. Spot with chairs on each side if you need to. Flex your abs to protect your back, contract your hip flexors like you're going to kick forward, and release tension and sag down. Now, this stretch I've been struggling with. I was doing it recently, and I was corrected by my coach, I guess you could say. He said that I was doing it wrong because I was twisting on one side, I was leaning forward, I was just doing it all wrong. So now that I've read the book, I really realize how much I have to change the way I'm stretching for some stretches. Now there are advanced stretches like the side split, the front split, what am I talking about? The front split, I can't do this anymore. The hip and side stretch, the bent press stretch, and the Cossack. These are 5 advanced stretches, and for these stretches, I recommend that you read the book because they are trickier to get. Like the side split, there's a lot of things that you should remember while doing, but I'm thinking I could do another episode about these advanced stretches. So if you want an episode where I explain all these stretches, then please comment. The next part of this podcast, part 5, is about injuries, demographics, and ligaments. Pavel talks of injuries, but only minor muscle tears because he says injuries is not his level of expertise. He says that with minor muscle tears, you should first rice it, which you've probably heard of. Rest, ice, compression, and elevation, a widely known technique which you can find plenty of info online. Then you should stretch it ASAP within 24 hours, which he warns will be painful because internal bleeding due to the muscle tear will cause your muscle to contract. Injured muscles retreat into spasms, and it's problematic because healing takes forever, the muscle atrophies, and you lose your flexibility. So the tight muscle is now likely to get re-injured. Lay off intense techniques like clasp knife and do rather low intensity forced relaxation many times during the day. Remember that stretching for back problems will relieve pain but will not fix it. A doctor is needed when it comes to that. And another important point is that everybody forgets that age and sex will dictate the choice of your stretching exercises. Men and women should stretch differently because of evident differences in anatomy. Again, this is a very interesting subject, which I can go further into detail into another episode. Russian scientist Filipovich says that children under 11 should not do any passive stretching and do active stretching instead. Pavel explains that children just don't have the patience necessary to wait out the tension. Pregnant women or women who have had children within a few months should be careful because relaxin, a hormone produced to help give birth, will loosen the ligaments and it can be dangerous. As said in the beginning, stretching your ligaments is unnecessary because the muscles have plenty of length and dangerous. Like Pavel said, stretching a ligament by 6% and it will tear. or cause a micro tear, making them loose and unstable, leading to injury or osteoarthritis. Joint hypermobility leads to degenerative changes in the cartilage padding the joint. Plus, it offers no athletic benefit whatsoever. So there's just literally no point, at least not for our species. So we're heading towards the end of this episode. Before we finish, let's close this up with some very important points. How much flexibility do you actually need? First of all, excessive flexibility can be detrimental to athletic performance. All you need is flexibility reserved above the demands of your sport, slightly above. Flexibility should not have the opposite effect and be detrimental. Pavel shows in his book how boxers, weightlifters, or runners can stretch too much certain parts of their bodies, which will impact their performance in a negative way. Hypermobility can be dangerous too. On the other hand, if your problem is gaining flexibility, a simple remedy is gaining strength, as contradictory as it may sound, but since you've listened to the beginning of this episode, you know all about it. There is also something called the reminiscence effect, which I think is pretty incredible. This is when you occasionally lay off stretching, and when you start again, after you pause, you find yourself even more bendy than before. How can that be possible? That's because your brain forgot your limit and you're able to reach further. Taking breaks is just as important too. This episode's quote is at the end this time to finish on a perfect note. This quote from oh my gosh, I have no idea how to pronounce that, Bayesiotto. Once again, sorry for the pronunciation. PhD, sports scientist, and world champion powerlifter said that honest ignorance is better than simulated understanding. I'll let you reflect on that and how you think it ties to this episode. I hope you learned so much and are ready to try those firsthand. You can order Pavel's books on Amazon and read some of his numerous other books to level up like you've never before. See you in our next episode. Bye!